Well, welcome to this week's drop-in session on trends in business process management, process improvement. It's an interesting time. So we're kind of just over halfway through the year, and we tend to publish an article early in the new year around the sort of current trends. And so we were having a bit of a conversation in the office weeks ago about how those trends are panning out this year, and whether the things we were seeing last year are the same or whether they've changed. And as a result of that conversation, we said, wouldn't it be interesting to go and explore that a little bit further and share some of that on the drop-in. So here we are today. So what I'm going to do is just share a little bit about the background on the information we're going to go through today. So it's not going to take too long because there's not a huge amount, but basically we've broken it down into three different areas. So the first section I'll talk a little bit about is what we call what our research is telling us. So as I said, our marketing team typically towards the end of the year they'll start doing research on what are the trends. And by that, what they'll do is they'll go and look at some of the different organizations that we work with. So some of them are research and analysis organizations, others are sort of membership bodies, that sort of thing. And a lot of these organizations will publish their own reports. They'll run annual surveys, obviously surveying people in business process management type roles. And then they'll present that information back. So we go and do a bunch of that research, which sort of helps us with messaging and so on. And as I said, we then tend to publish a blog on that at the beginning of the year. So we've got a bit of that, and then sort of what if anything we've seen that's changed. So that's the second piece we call this is what are you telling us? And so that's more about what sort of questions are coming into us, predominantly through our support desk and customer success work that we do. So Hamzo's on the call is just going to touch on a little bit. He's been doing a bit of analysis of tickets and things like that on the support desk to look at the sort of non-technical questions that are coming through to us. So that sort of tell you a little bit about what people are asking. And then the last section I've got on here, I've called this what the internet is telling us. And basically what I mean by that is we've got quite a big library of articles on our website covering all sorts of different topics. And so obviously a lot of those articles are aimed at certain areas. But what we do is we constantly monitor the traffic, i.e. the search traffic that's coming in from Google and Bing. And it's quite interesting because most of our articles break down into various themes and topics. And what we see over a period of time is that the different themes they rise up and fall in terms of popularity. So what we'll do is we'll touch on what we've seen as being the popular articles this year. So let's start off with what the research is telling us. So as I said, this is mainly based on sort of research that we were doing at the end of last year, and looking at reports. So just in terms of sources, when I talk about the sort of research and analyst type things, some of the common ones we use, this is not all of them, but I'll name a few. So APQC is one. So APQC are a membership organization that provide things like process classification frameworks. We've talked about them before in previous drop-in sessions. They provide benchmarking data for metrics and KPIs for organizations as well. And again, they do regular surveys and reports. We look at the Process Excellence Network. So again, they do an annual survey and publish a report on that. Another one that I found quite useful recently is the Business Transformation and Operational Excellence Summit. So again, in the lead up to their summits, they do surveys and publish a report, which is quite interesting. So it gives you a flavour of some of the sources for this information. So I'll just touch on a couple of these, and then I'll just give a bit of a perspective, the Skore perspective, if you like, on these topics. But it's no surprise, I'm sure, to anyone that topping the list of things that get talked about in these is AI and machine learning. And for those of you who maybe not been following in any depth this particular technology and how it's developed over the last few years, you'll all know that it's been in the news an awful lot in the media, certainly since the end of last year. And one of the reasons it's been so prevalent in the media during that time is because of the rapidly maturing nature of what they call generative AI. So typically what machine learning does is it takes data sets and it analyzes data sets to identify patterns in that data set. And then what we can do is what we call predictive AI or machine learning is we basically analyze that data, identify the patterns, and then as new data is created, we're able to apply that learning to that new data and then see if any of those patterns exist, and then as a result start to try and predict what might be happening next. So it's been around, AI and machine learning has been around for many, many years, but certainly in the last 10 to 15 years has been used extensively in a lot of technologies. So a lot of software platforms already have it. The thing that sort of has changed is what they call generative AI. And so this is this idea of actually going, give me something. So going to the AI and asking for something and it creates something. So the most famous one is Chat GPT, but there are various others that will create music, they'll create imagery and so on. And you basically give you give it some instructions. And so Chat GPT, you might say, write me an essay on the history of the fall of Rome or something similar, and then it will produce what looks like a very well written, well formatted answer to that question. And so in terms of what we're seeing around business process management, the predictive side of it, as I say, has been around for quite some time, mainly around sort of managing process performance and benchmarking, that sort of thing, and trying to understand what might happen if you make changes to the organization. Where we're sort of starting to see generative AI come in is where things like I've seen an example in one process application where you were able to go in and say, provide me a basic description of how this process works, and then what it will do is it will then produce a bunch of text which explains what the details of a particular step in a process. And it's quite interesting, but it does require quite a lot of effort to then go and sanity check it. And basically what generative AI is doing is it's actually using exactly the same model as predictive AI. It looks at historical data to identify patterns, and then it tries to understand the context of your question, and then it sort of tries to predict what it thinks the answer might be. And the challenge with that is that what it's doing is it's using probability to provide an answer. So it's going, the most likely answer is probably going to be something like this. And the challenge with that is it's not necessarily correct or true. It will be just something that looks like it's right. It can be quite useful in terms of giving you a leg up or a step up. So I've used it a couple of times recently when working with companies where they've said, can you come and help us map process X? And it'll be a process that I'm not particularly familiar with. So I've been to Chat GPT and say, explain to me the main steps in process X, and it will do a relatively good job of describing that. Now, from that perspective, because what I'm going to do is go and model that process with the group of stakeholders to describe their process, it's giving me enough information to understand when they start talking about different things in that process, what it might mean. So the warning here, it's powerful, it's useful, but you just need to be aware that the information, what it's doing is it's trying to predict the information, but the information isn't necessarily correct. That's the sort of point I'm trying to make. It's really powerful for kind of speeding things up, getting a good understanding of the process before you need to document it, but don't rely on it to give you a perfect answer for the process. And I suppose the other point there is that often when you're documenting processes, it's part of a change program that you're going through, and actually you might need to get buy-in. So don't sort of try to bypass talking to people by using AI. So it's a key piece there. the information that we look at in these, obviously they are sort of described in different ways and themed in different ways in these in the reports. So we're trying to sort of group them together into themes that make sense for us and how we explain them. But one of the key ones that seem to come out more so in the last 12 months than I've seen before is the idea. We've grouped simplicity and inclusivity together, but basically this sort of recognition that to really implement large scale change successfully is really about including people and getting them involved early on. And so inclusivity means not only engaging with stakeholders and bringing them in, but making sure that the tools you're using are the right tools for them as well. So again, we're everything from sort of enterprise architecture right through to business process management and improvement. You're really starting to see the language of people talking about, okay, so the technical models we've traditionally used to understand how systems work together, they're great for us as the experts, but they're not great for engaging with the wider business or wider stakeholders. So it's definitely starting to see a lot more language with how do we simplify things down so that we can communicate effectively with a bigger audience rather than being focused on a small technical audience. So that's quite an interesting one, because that's very much an area that we focus on in Skore. Another one that, again, just sort of trying to group some of these ideas together, but is this idea of what we've called here platforms over tools. And so that's moving away from using lots and lots of, when I say tools, I mean things like trying to do process management with Word documents and PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets. So, we see Excel spreadsheets used for not only doing managing version control of various documents, but doing analysis and all sorts of, everyone's got 101 Excel trackers, and then they're trying to manage all of this information in one or more SharePoint repositories. And so we're seeing more and more teams looking for platforms. How do I take a platform that will help me manage all of that information and provide it in a central location, have much more consistency of how we document and present that information. And then the last one that we've got on our list here, which was something that was much bigger going back to, I was going to say 2 or 3, probably even more than that, years ago, is analytics. It's still really, really important. So you might be capturing and document information, but how do we make sense of it and analyze it? And that, again, is certainly a big driver we see for people looking at our platform. But visual analytics to really make sense of data that organizations are collecting are a real big topic. So those are the sort of key ones. I mean, as I say, this is this hasn't really changed a great deal since we put this together at the beginning of the year. The AI machine learning was already quite popular, but it's really sort of taken off since then. Let's go and quickly look at what you're telling us. So what is, Hamza, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I wonder if you just spend a few minutes just telling us about the sort of work you've been doing and looking at what sort of questions and requests are coming in to the support desk.
Yeah, absolutely, Craig. So we reviewed support cases over the past 12 to 18 months to see sort of what questions were coming in and what was being asked outside of the general technical questions, such as, for example, how to reset your password. So we're looking at some of the other questions. And of course, thanks to everyone who submits any questions or issues or bug reports. We always appreciate it. So we've grouped these into some themes. So we've got 3 themes here. And the first one that we're going to look at is analytics. So there's visual analytics in other tools as well. So we've got Power BI, Tableau, and Zoho Analytics. And these are some of the tools that we've been asked about in the past. And we find that we've got teams that are looking to take data which is captured in Skore, and they're looking to actually use it to augment other data that they collect about the performance of their processes, and then combine this in another tool. So the most common way that you can actually do this is in Skore. When you go to the reporting section and you generate a report that you want, there's an Excel button, and that will let you export an Excel file, and then you can upload that data into your analytics tool of your choice. But it is possible to actually use a Skore API So if you are interested in this, you can actually contact us if you want to learn more. I mean, you can contact us at support@getscored.com, and we'd be happy to get into touch with you about that. And moving on to general analytics and Skore. So if you don't know already, Skore can actually automatically generate charts based on information that is captured in your custom fields. So this can be any data that you want, and it doesn't always have to make sense, but we often get asked whether we've done analysis on different things, and the answer is always custom fields, and that can be things such as risks, controls, requirements, and so on. But there's often a lot more, and that's the power of custom fields, is that you can choose what sort of capture data that you want to capture and generate. So we're looking at quantify as well. So that's a very popular topic. So a lot of users find the quantify form, and that's always in your process. You're actually able to add duration, so how long does a task take to complete, and so on. But there's actually a whole dashboard that shows the analysis of that information. So similar to the reporting, how you've got lots of reports based on different things, we've also got a dashboard built for the durations, and that's where quantify comes into play. You can actually add costs to these processes. So Skore lets you calculate these costs, and you can also record full-time equivalents. So you know, you can basically map the capacity in your team, how efficient your team is, how often tasks are being completed, and that's all able to be done and utilized thanks to quantify as well. So the next point that we'll be looking at is universal process notation, or UPN. And the basics of UPN, it's super simple. And when we mention this to users, they actually find it really hard to believe that it is actually this simple, and that you can present complex processes just simply using UPN notation. So we get a lot of questions from both existing customers and customers who are looking to join the Skore platform. And this is about how to represent different processes using UPN. And the answer is always the same. So you always start with your title and your scope, and then you think about the key activities, and then you define the outputs and then also the roles. And if you just follow those simple steps, it doesn't matter what process you have, whether you're looking to convert a process using UPN or to create a brand new process. If you just follow those simple steps, you'll be able to map any type of process using UPN. And we also have a video on our YouTube channel, which we'll mention later, that goes over how to map basically a process using UPN. And the last point that we've got is on process improvement knowledge beyond Skore. So whether this is requests to join our community, our Skore community online, or signpost to other information such as our knowledge base or our YouTube channel, we get a lot of questions about how to implement process improvement and run process improvement initiatives beyond using Skore. Some of the questions that we actually get from the community include things such as how to apply lean tools such as lean wastes alongside Skore, how to manage process change, what sort of team do we need to be able to do this, what sort of skills does someone carrying out process improvement require? So what is needed of the individual who's actually doing this process improvement? And then we've got other questions such as how do I scope a process? How do you run a process workshop? And this is where our community comes into play. So we've got platforms such as LinkedIn, where we post every now and then. We've got our YouTube channel, which is a great center of knowledge for anyone looking to improve their process improvement skills. And then we've also got these knowledge base as well, which if you want to find out how to do something in Skore, that's a great place as well to find out how to do things. So with all that being said, I will now pass it on to Craig for the final point, which is looking at what the internet is telling us.
Thank you, Hamza. Of course, there's also these sessions as well that people often come to. But yeah, I find that last point is quite interesting. Those questions that come in of people are sort of establishing the use of Skore and again, okay, now we're sort of moved to the next level. Can you either introduce us to resources that can help with these other sorts of areas? So we just find that quite interesting. Some interesting questions that come through from you guys. So this last one, I say, we called it what the internet is telling us, but basically, as I say, we regularly publish blogs and articles on our website. Now, I sometimes think that this is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we do this research every year, which to understand what the trends are in this space, and then we go and write and create content based on that. So you'll start to see some of the themes repeating, right? And it's obvious that they're going to repeat. What I find interesting about this, as I said before, is that these themes are themes that we've been publishing content on for many years on our website, and a lot of them we will change and update as new information comes along. But what I find interesting is how this actually changes over time. So what I've done is I've only taken the top 4 kind of areas, but I've looked back just over the last since the beginning of this year, so just over 6 months of traffic, and by far and away the most popular topic we're seeing, and so when I say popular topics, I'm talking about all of the blogs and articles we've got around process workshops, and we look at the number of visits that people have made from organic search. So that basically means someone's gone onto the internet and gone onto Google or Bing and said, how do I run a process workshop? And when they get the search results, they've clicked through onto one of our articles to read it. So that's basically how we've ranked these topics here. So the process workshop one's really interesting because that's really popular. And in fact, there's a couple of other sort of slightly tangential articles related to it as well, which could maybe fit into process mapping basics as well, which are also really popular at the moment. And these ones have really risen up. If I were to look at the data from about 12 months ago, process workshops probably would have been place 3 or 4 on this list. In fact, the last time process workshops were at the top spot on our traffic to our website was in the early stages of the pandemic. So kind of from sort of March 2020, for about 12 months, it was the sort of top topic on our website, and then it dropped down, but just this year. Now, I don't have any kind of analysis as to why that's come up that way, but it's interesting that there's obviously a lot of work going on at the moment across organizations. Most of our traffic is UK and North America based. So if you were to narrow it down, I guess partly you could suggest that given the economic uncertainty, I mean, we've seen this sort of thing in waves over the years, that a lot of organizations will be looking at, okay, how do we get our processes in order, make sure that we're running things as efficiently as possible. So again, that could be a potential reason. The number 2 spot on there is something that's interesting. Now, again, going back to my comment about sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, we had very few articles on this topic, probably going back 12 to 18 months ago, but the few that we did were quite popular. And so we've obviously there's something that people are interested in, so we've started to explore different types of alternatives. So what are the things that people are looking for alternatives to? There's obviously a view of, okay, we've done this in this way for this long, let's now look at different ways of doing it or alternatives. If I go back to the first piece of research, and funnily enough, and part of what Hamza talked about there, so in the surveys and reports, we see this concept of simplicity and inclusivity. So people looking for other approaches, more simple or human-centric approaches to how they document processes. The Process Excellence Network, I think it was their report last year, not this year, last year's report was interesting because it mentioned the UPN approach quite a few times in there. Now, I think it was the first time I'd seen that coming up, and that was results from their survey of people talking about it. And Hamza obviously mentioned we get a lot of questions around that area coming in on our support desk of people asking how to do it. So again, quite interesting that there's this sort of move to look at, okay, are there other more simple or alternative ways of documenting processes, which again is interesting. Point 3 on there, which is always a popular one on our website, is the basics, like people looking for how do I map a process. Probably a little bit lower than it typically is on this scale at the moment. It's probably nearer the top normally, I would say. Looking back at the data over the last few years, is probably typically one of the most popular topics. It still is one of the most popular topics, but it's pushed down to 3rd place at the moment. But again, we're seeing just a general increase in traffic across the board. So although it might be lower at the moment in terms of its relation to other topics on our website, the amount of traffic coming to those articles is very similar or is still increasing. So again, interesting that there's obviously a lot of interest in just general process mapping information at the moment. And then the last piece is what I've again sort of grouped together different types of process improvement type techniques. So we've got a lot of people looking at RACI, roles and responsibility analysis, costing, time and motion studies, how do I optimize a process, that sort of thing. Interestingly, although we do have articles on lean on our website, we don't get a huge amount of traffic to them. So although we see more questions around that topic coming in on the support desk, we don't see that much activity on the website, and that's mainly because we don't write a huge amount about it. We're probably not really seen as an authority on it, so it's not going to generate a huge amount of traffic on the website. But to me, the kind of key things coming out of this analysis that we've been doing on the trends is, this sort of move towards how do we keep things simple, how do we engage and communicate effectively with the whole organization around processes. That's the sort of big theme that's really coming through on all the areas we look at. The other thing is that there just seems to be a general increase in people looking for information about process mapping, process documentation, process improvement. Again, just the amount of traffic we're getting, but we're also seeing in the sort of surveys and responses to surveys is also quite interesting. And analytics, although it's not such a big point in this piece of the analysis here, in the other two areas, analytics or visual analytics has been a sort of growing and important part of what we're doing, that we're expecting to see more of that. So quick note on how that's influencing what we're doing. We're obviously sort of constantly looking at ways we can improve analytics in our product. So we've got some new exciting things coming up later this year that will certainly strengthen that part of the application. And going back to the AI and machine learning, it's something we've been sort of looking at and experimenting with for some time. And again, we've got some ideas that we'll be looking to implement in the product in the coming months and years as well. So that was a quick overview of the trends and so on we're seeing at the moment. So right, well, thank you once again for coming along, joining in today. Perfect. All right, thank you very much. Have a lovely week, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everyone.